Good morning. We will call to order the meeting of the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners for the canvass of the returns and proclamation of results of the March 15, 2016 general primary election held in the city of Chicago. My name is Maricel Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman of the board. Seated to my left is Commissioner Jonathan T. Swain, and to my right is Commissioner William J. Cressy. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the tabulated statement of the returns and proclamation of the results of the canvass of the election returns for the March 15, 2016 general primary election held in the city of Chicago. Is there a motion to approve and adopt?
Can we object?
No, at this time, not Dr. Chamberlain. Thank you, though. Is there a motion to approve and adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor on the motion to approve and adopt, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes, and the proclamation is in effect. Is there any further discussion? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.
Is there going to be a public comment period?
Yeah.
There's going to be another meeting.
Yeah. Just go right to the.
We will call to order the Board of Election Commissioners special board meeting for April 5th, 2016. Good morning. My name is Maricel Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman. Seated to my right is Commissioner William J. Cressy, and to my left is Commissioner Jonathan T. Swain. At this time, are there any changes to the agenda? If not, we will proceed with the approval of the minutes, the regular board meeting of March 22nd, 2016. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to let you know, give you some dates that are upcoming schedules of some meetings. The Bipartisan Policy Center is coming into the city of Chicago to meet in this room, believe it or not. 40 of the largest jurisdictions are coming to Chicago to meet, discuss elections and some problems and some best practices. It'll start on the 11th, the morning of the 11th. It'll be an all-day program, and on Tuesday, the 12th, they'll be traveling to our warehouse and Cook County's warehouse to see how we stage our elections. So I just wanted the board members to be aware of that. Also, the EAC is coming into town on Sunday, May 1st. They will be at the Westin Hotel downtown. They have a 3-day program. This is part of the EAC. They have every quarter they do a meeting in different parts of the United States, and they're coming to Chicago. So we will be co-hosting the EAC meeting. So I just wanted the board members to be aware of that. And I'll be passing out a calendar on that also.
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Goff, for the record, what does EAC?
This is the Election Assistance Commission that was formed by the President of the United States. Also, the Bipartisan Policy Committee was formed by the President's office also. So they will both be coming into Chicago.
Thanks.
Other items are, as we know, I've been talking about this at every meeting, this upcoming November election, the possibility of we will have 2 ballots, but there may be, depending on how big the constitutional amendment, may be 3 ballots. This will probably be the largest ballot that the city will see in a long time. We're worried about long lines at early voting sites. So for November, my suggestion is opening all 51 of our early voting sites all the way through, that's Monday before the election. I'm working on that with staff to get additional bodies, so I want the board members to know that we're gonna do this. So we've already made the decision.
All
Yes.
51 from the initial point until the Monday before.
Yes.
And what time? Same?
We were hoping that we would have some relief from the legislature, but it will be, on that Monday, be open till 7 in the
Till
evening.
7, okay.
Yes.
Has there been any further study on the idea of having on the weekend before 1 or 2 super sites or more super sites that would have plenty of parking?
We're still looking at it. It's hard to find space and locations for a couple of days. I'm still working on it. In fact, for this location here on Washington Street, I'm looking at using that Walgreens there. So, I mean, we're looking for some large sites. I think that we're looking for a huge turnout for this November, and this agency is going to be prepared for it. It's one thing that I'm really upset about are long lines, and I'm going to do everything we can to make sure we do not have lines so our voters do not have to wait. You saw what happened in other parts of the United States with 5-6 hour waiting lines. I'm going to do everything we can so we do not have this happen. The problem is that a lot of people wait till the last minute. So, but we're going to try to work on that. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that. You know, with not only early voting, but with no fault vote by mail, hopefully we should be able to take care of this.
Right. And I think one of our goals is to get larger sites so we can accommodate more equipment and more voters, and let it, you know, the flow will be better.
Yeah, we're going to meet with all of the different, like the park districts, library boards. We're going to meet with everybody to sit down and tell them what the problem is. We also have a meeting with General Services to see about any other city buildings that we can use. So it's something that we are working on. We've been working on ever since the end of the last election, so I want the board members to be aware of that.
And I just want to thank you for beginning so soon after the primary election in terms of trying to find more sites and trying to find bigger ones that hopefully will accommodate our voters.
We also are working with Dominion Voting to put together a Vistal report for our ballot cards, swiping those in instead of using the hats at early voting sites. So we have a meeting with them today to figure out how we're going to do that. So we're working on that Vistal report. And basically, we're just trying to wrap up the board. My supervisors have just finished doing the proclamation. We're going to be doing our debriefing meetings. We'll have several debriefing meetings in different sections, so I'll be informing the board members of where we are on that. Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Bateman?
Good morning. Just recapping what Mr. Goff said, just all the departments are finishing up. Registration finished the provisional processing last week, provisional ballots, so that's completed. Now they're going on to other events or other projects that will keep them busy throughout the summer. I have election judge numbers for you. So the number of Democratic judges that served on election day is 5,095. Number of Republican judges that served is 3,946. The number of what we call did not serves, and those are individuals who were assigned to serve but do not work on election day, was 1,436. And then the number of walk-ins or swear-ins was 269. And as far as election coordinators, we had 2,032 that served. And we had over 200 standby election coordinators, so we were able to dispatch those on election day and get them out to precincts where an election coordinator did not arrive. Other than that, warehouse, we finished the 5% last week for both precinct and early voting. They are now just working on inventory of all the equipment and just making sure we've received everything back. And we'll start in the future going through ESCs and just cleaning up from March and preparing for November.
Okay. How do the do not serves, how does that number compare to?
Previous, I think it's the same, yeah,
About the same.
unfortunately. It's a lot of factors, weather, you know, if they didn't make it to training, they just decide that day that they just don't want to serve. It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. So,
Yes,
Yes.
you mentioned the provisional ballots.
Yes.
I heard a couple of reports where provisional ballots, after they're voted, they're to be placed in the envelope and
Mhm.
then we process them later. There were some instances where provisional ballots were fed into the ballot scanner. What occurs when that happens?
They leave them in the scanner.
So it will accept the
Oh, yeah.
ballot?
Yes, it will.
Yes.
Is there
It
any
goes
way
through.
that the ballot form can be coded so it rejects a provisional ballot?
We did that at one earlier election.
We do it, it's,
When we have small elections,
Yeah.
we're able to do that. When you have over 900 different ballot styles, it's hard to run, because you'd have to run, it's the same ballot, but basically you'd have to run it several passes to get different ballot styles through,
different coding.
different coding.
It would take
It's a
longer.
coding problem
Mhm.
and a printing problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but if a provisional ballot, though, is run through the scanner, those votes are
Yes.
are
Fair
cast?
count, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. and
The
then-
ballot has the word provisional at the top, and that's basically the only difference. But it will go through the scanner and it will count, yes.
Do we have any idea of how many provisional ballots were in fact cast before we could determine whether that ballot should be cast?
Do we know how many were cast?
Were fed through the scanner and counted before determining, otherwise there would be a determination later on whether or not that ballot should be cast,
Right.
correct?
Exactly, but once it goes into the scanner, and then at the end of the evening, when the judges take out all the ballots from the ballot box, they don't know which ballot belongs to who, so. But
Right.
no, once it goes through, and the voters are given the provisional ballot envelope. They take it with them into the voting booth. They're instructed to, once they complete their voting, fold it and place it inside, seal it, and then bring it back to the judges of election. And sometimes, if a polling place is crowded or busy or whatever, they just go over and insert it into the ballot scanner.
Right, and I'm asking, do we have any numbers as to how many provisional ballots that
What-
should have been placed in an envelope were in fact
Go through the
processed?
scanner? No, because the ballots right now are sitting inside their transfer cases. So, I mean, the only way we would know is to actually open the transfer cases and go through the stack of ballots to see which ones have provisional written across the top.
Right, no, I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if we should reconsider the idea of doing something to make sure that such ballots will not get
Yeah, a separate
counted
coding?
in either separate coding or the judges place an X or something on a provisional ballot so it doesn't get picked up in the scanner.
Okay,
Could you look back and look into that
Sure.
and report back to me? I'd appreciate it. So,
absolutely. That's all I have, thank you.
thank you.
Now to our communications director, Mr. Allen.
Good morning, Commissioners. Overall, statistically, this election was, we led the state, Chicago led the state in terms of overall turnout, even though several other jurisdictions set records. We've actually had 4 presidential primaries with higher turnouts, so this wasn't a record for Chicago, but still, we led the state with 53% turnout, 800,000 ballots cast. Early voting was high, but certainly not our highest, 140,000. We actually had more early voting ahead of last year's mayoral election. And in hindsight, I think one of the contributing factors there was that, if you remember, the runoff election fell during the middle of spring break and Passover. So there were a lot of people who availed themselves of voting and vote by mail, more so than this time. Vote by mail ballots, we have about 29,000 that were returned and in our counts. Election day registration, we led the state there to 33,000 that were approximately 24,000 that were new registrations and 9,100 that were address and name changes. That's our preliminary tally. So that was really a huge success because that accounts for upward of 3-4% of our total turnout. A number of people have asked whether the presidential primary drove turnout or whether it was more local contests, and I think we can honestly say it was a little of both, because for the first time that Lance and I are aware of, there were more votes cast in the state's attorney's race than the U.S. Senate contest, way up higher on the ballot. So we're still looking ahead to, like Lance said, surpassing our normal 74, 76% turnout in November. This is our first time using digital advertising to promote various programs like early voting, signing up for election judges, what have you. That seemed to work well. But for the first time, we received feedback from a voter who worked in his neighborhood. I thought I'd share these with you. I can see these down there. These were flyers that voter, he's not with any kind of organization. Michael Levine up in the 49th Ward did to promote early voting and vote by mail, basically taking information from our website, adapting it to his neighborhood, and he went door to door up there and circulated these flyers, nonpartisan in any way, just encouraging people to get out to vote. So that was really impressive.
That's very nice. Very nice.
So we had, in addition to our high school students and our judges of election and everybody else, people taking up the charge of democracy. Very nice. With that, that's about it for now. We're just gearing up for the information campaigns. We want to focus on the universities and the rental areas for election day registration. Try to get more information out there about getting to the correct polling place, precinct. So we're going to be looking closely at that data, those data rather, and to try to make sure that we have enough equipment and personnel in place for election day registration in the fall.
Very good.
Any questions? Okay. Hearing none, we'll proceed to old business and infrastructure projects and changes in election administration. I think
Not at this time.
we're holding.
We're going to keep that on the agenda, though.
Exactly. Next item, electronic poll books. We don't have anything on that right now.
Doing a
And
debriefing on that, Madam Chair.
voting equipment, I think.
We're working on, we are going to do, hopefully, the county clerks in our office is looking at doing a request for proposal, send it out there for new voting equipment. I think now's the time to replace what we have. And hopefully the 2017 would be a great time to put something in place for the 2018 election. So hopefully in the next month we'll be getting that information out.
Wonderful, thank you. And the last item under this section is legislation. Mr. Scanlon?
Well,
You did send.
Madam Chairman and Commissioner, I did send a report out, report on the status of legislation. The House and Senate back in this week. We need to check any committee hearings on bills, but I'll forward that information along to the commissioners as soon as I obtain it.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is under new business, a resolution to dispose of election materials from the March 18, 2014 general primary election. Mr. Scanlon?
Madam Chairwoman, you have before you a resolution to dispose of election materials from the March 18th, 2014 general primary election. The statutory period for maintaining and keeping intact the ballots, ballot applications, certificate of results, affidavits, and other paper material for the election has expired. There is no pending litigation or election contest with respect to the results of the March 2014 primary election, and therefore it is recommended that the board adopt and approve the resolution authorizing the disposal of those election materials in accordance with the Local Records Act.
Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt and approve the resolution to dispose of election materials from? I'm sorry, if you could just wait for public comment, from the March 18, 2014 general primary election.
I would ask, if I may, there is some materials here that I would have a personal interest in for conducting a study, and that would simply be the provisional ballot envelopes. So can I exclude that temporarily, take a look at those, and for a study that I'd like to conduct, and then they can be destroyed with the rest of them? If I could amend this resolution for that purpose,
For 2014.
for 2014. Do we,
That's up
let
to-
me, do we have data on the number of provisional ballots that were, do we have data already on the number of provisional ballots that were cast in 2014?
I'm sure there is. I
Yes,
don't
there
have
is.
Do we have that information? If we have that information, then the materials can be destroyed.
Isn't 7 years the regulation, the state regulation,
No.
and the federal regulations?
That is not what the CBLE employee informed me when I
Okay,
was discussing this question.
if you could just wait till the public comment section, I'd appreciate it.
We want to do
Okay?
it before the motion.
Is there a motion, I asked previously, is there a motion to adopt and approve the resolution to dispose of election materials from the March 18, 2014 general primary election?
I will so move.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All
Do we
those
have
in favor?
Discussion on that? Just short
Okay.
discussion. Council, what is the statutory requirement as to the keeping of these materials?
For federal and state elections, the minimum retention period is 22 months. For city elections, it's 1 year.
And the March 14 election was what? That was a federal.
Right,
a
more
federal office.
than 2 years ago, that was a federal election.
Thank you.
So the minimum statutory requirement for retention is 22 months.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, is there,
I do have one
Okay.
question. What's the manner with which they're destroyed? Just for,
I'm sorry?
what's the manner with which they're destroyed? Just shredded and,
In accordance with the Local Records Act,
Okay.
typically that is shredding, yes.
okay, great.
Yeah. These are given, resolution would go to the Local Records Commission, and then they would approve that resolution, and then the
Further
materials
oversee the process.
could be destroyed, yes.
Okay, great.
okay? There has been a motion and a second to adopt and approve the resolution to dispose of election materials from the March 18, 2014 general primary election. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes, and the resolution is adopted and approved.
Do we
Okay?
need to sign that now?
We can do that now, yes. Here it is.
Just fill in the day's date.
Please.
Gotcha.
Mr. Scanlon, is there a legal report?
Nothing to report on at this time, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay. There is no financial report.
Not at this time.
Okay. So next on the agenda is public comment, and I would like to remind our speakers that we have rules, and that includes 5 minutes per person for public comment. The first person I have is Dr. Laura Chamberlain.
Thank you.
And Ms. Chamberlain, you're representing whose county, Chicago?
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And your topic is the audit and the proclamation.
Yep,
Okay, which one do you
Okay.
want to take first?
both, because we objected to the proclamation. There's two aspects to, in general, in the most simplistic terms, there's two aspects of elections. And elections are extremely important. They do matter. So it is getting people to vote, and it's also counting their vote correctly. And there is a general feeling amongst the American public, and especially in Illinois and in Chicago as well, that we don't have enough checks and balances on the getting people to vote and also getting our votes counted correctly. That is where poll watchers and observers come in, and we are extremely concerned about getting our votes counted correctly. I want to preface it with that. Election fraud does exist by election jurisdictions across the country. You can look at Maricopa, Arizona, with the recent voter suppression that was particularly politically motivated. Florida 2000, Ohio in 2004. There's documented election fraud by election jurisdictions across the country. So we are extremely concerned about this. The General Assembly enacted a 5% audit to give the citizens an assurance that their votes are being counted correctly. 5% audit of the paper ballots, the precinct paper ballots, and the touchscreens on the precincts, and 5% of the early voting is statistically relevant to a large election, like a presidential election. It's not statistically relevant to an aldermanic race or a committeeman race. I want you to know that. The smaller ones, the 5% audit does not count enough votes to be statistically relevant. We went in, Who's Counting Chicago and Illinois Ballot Integrity took dozens of citizens into the Chicago Board of Elections to audit the audit this election season. We were down there for 4 days, starting March 23rd. And what they do is, do I have to explain this? Have you all been to the audit? Have you witnessed the audit? Okay, so you know that they take the paper ballots from the precincts, they put them through another machine, they unroll the touchscreen machines from the precinct, they count votes, and then they unroll the rolls from early voting machines and they count votes. But what we saw was not an audit. That's what they call it, but it wasn't an audit, and we are really, really concerned. A number of objections that we have about what happened this past season is all of the citizens were Illinois registered voters. They had credentials from Illinois Ballot Integrity. There's nothing in this audit that ties a vote to a voter, nothing at all. So there's no reason why we couldn't have filmed, looked, seen everything that was in that room, because nothing except things possibly in the blue bags, but things on top of the table we should have been able to observe completely.
And just one question. Nothing that ties a vote to a voter, but isn't that the way it's supposed to be? We're not
Right.
supposed to know.
Right, exactly. We don't want to tie a vote to a voter.
Okay.
We didn't want to see anything that tied a vote to a voter.
Okay.
But that's not what was there. But still, we were kept from looking at paper ballots. We were kept from looking at the touchscreen. There was a lot of hiding behavior on the part of the Board of Elections employees under the direction of Mr. Scanlon to keep us from seeing the actual votes that were being counted. And we object to that highly. There was nothing there that tied a voter to a voter, a vote to a voter, so we should have been able to witness it all and see it all. Number 3, we highly object to an audit where the answers to the tests, sirs, are sitting right there in front of the Board of Elections employees that are trying to count these ballots. So what we saw, and many of us saw, you'll hear time and time again, that what happened in reality, especially with the touchscreen machines, especially with the early voting machines, because there's lots of votes,
And
okay?
just so you know, you have 1 more minute. Huh?
Yeah, I'm sorry?
You have 1 more minute.
Okay, is that the auditors, the people that are doing the hand tallies of the votes, would miss votes, correct their tallies, erase their tallies to fit the prescribed recommended official results that the Board of Elections has right on their tally sheet. There's a lot of pressure, including their employment, that is pushing them towards complying with the Board of Elections results. And not just actually just reading the votes and tallying the votes. It's supposed to be a hand count of the votes, but that's not what happened. We have got you, in your packet you have a bunch of affidavits, and in one particular egregious example of this, I was watching the hand count of an early voting machine, and at the end of it, they had to erase 21 Bernie Sanders votes and add 49 Hillary Clinton votes to force the hand count of the audit of this toilet paper roll to the recommended Chicago Board of Elections official results.
Thank you.
And we object to that kind of audit. It's not an audit.
Okay.
We would like an independent audit
Okay.
going forward
Thank you.
with some quality assurance to it.
Thank you, Dr. Laura Chamberlain. Mr. England, do you have any comments or anyone at this point? Mr. Scanlon?
Madam Chairman. Ms. Chamberlain
Yeah.
reported that I kept them from looking at the ballots and materials. That's not true. She had requested at the beginning of the 5% audit that the optical scan ballots be inserted into the scanners with the face of the ballot facing up, and so that they could observe on the front of the ballot. My response to her was that we were not going to do anything out of the ordinary, and that we were going to insert the ballots in whatever orientation they happen to be, because the machine will accept a ballot no matter which way you insert the ballot into the machine, whether it's the first page up top or the back page, doesn't make any difference. Upside down, doesn't make any difference. It accepts the ballot and counts the ballot. And the purpose of the 5% audit for the ballot scanners and for all the machines was to see if the retabulation of the ballots produces a result that is similar to the result of the election night, when the ballots were counted on scanners and on touchscreen machines. This was not a discovery recount. Because in a discovery recount, where a candidate files for a discovery recount or an election contest, the candidates have the right to examine the ballots and all the election materials. But again, this was not an election contest. This is a 5% audit to see if the results of the retabulation match up with the results on election night. So I informed Ms. Chamberlain that we were not going to take any special steps in terms of insertion of the ballots. Now, they were there. They had, I think we had 25 stations at the warehouse. They had poll watchers at every station. They could observe the ballots as they were being inserted into the machine. There was nothing to prevent them from observing the ballots. They were there at every table, at every station. They had an opportunity to observe the ballots. I think the only objection Ms. Chamberlain had was that the ballots weren't being inserted with face up, and there was no requirement to do that. So I just want to point that out.
We're citizens, and we wanted to, we were auditing the presidential list.
Doctor, can I have Mr. Scanlon finish? I think he should be entitled to respond.
I think the other point that Ms. Chamberlain made was that the results of the audit, the retabulation, was done, and I think she's suggesting that it was being manipulated to match the results on election night. Do the board employees know what the election night results were? Yes, we do. Everyone does. I haven't seen the affidavits that Ms. Chamberlain produced. I would imagine that the affidavit, would state, would support that the results were manipulated, but I don't think that is the case. Again, Ms. Chamberlain had poll watchers at every table. They had the opportunity to see what our employees were doing. They could see that, as far as the insertion of the ballots into the scanners, as far as the touchscreens are concerned, what the employees do is then take the tape from the touchscreen machine and they record on a sheet by hand each vote count for every candidate. And they had the opportunity to observe when we did this. So I would respectfully disagree with Ms. Chamberlain as far as any intention to try to manipulate the results of the 5% audit. That was certainly not the case.
And we will look at the affidavits
And I would
very
like to
carefully.
respond to that quickly.
Well, I think at
I
this
would like to
point,
respond to that quickly, because what happened is because Mr. Scanlon said that we were not to see the tapes, we were not to see the, the ballots, he was going to flip over the ballots. He gave a general indication to the Board of Elections employees that we were not to see anything except what he specifically allowed us to see. So the Board of Elections employees were counting out the ballots like this and hiding their tally sheets. This was observed
Yes.
by everybody there? I'm not the only one. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
allowing me to rebut.
May I ask a question of this? May I ask
Sure.
a question? Just a couple of things. I haven't been able to look at the affidavits you
Right.
just presented. I'll certainly take this under consideration. Does any of these point to any of the election races? Would they have changed the results of the
Absolutely.
race?
In the one race that I quoted you, the touchscreen machine, it was a large touchscreen machine, had a lot of votes on it, 70 votes where they had to. So the hand tally showed that Bernie Sanders had gotten 223 votes and that Hillary Clinton had gotten 46 less votes. The hand tally showed that.
Okay.
But to meet the official recommended results, they had to literally erase Bernie Sanders' votes and add Hillary Clinton's.
Would
That's
those-
approximately 70 votes, 70 times about 500 active machines in the field, and there's more that we have documented here, is a lot of votes. Those are a lot of votes.
You also question whether this was an audit
Yeah.
or not. You, Dr. Chamberlain, what?
I'm a
Dr.
family physician, so quality assurance.
So you're an MD?
I'm a DO.
A DO, okay.
Family physician.
Okay.
And so we know a little bit about quality assurance and
And I'm a
auditing.
professor of auditing, so
Okay,
that's,
great,
yeah.
and
So
auditing
this is an audit.
right. No, it's not, because
Yes,
it's not with any quality assurance. It's an audit without any
There are
quality
different
assurance.
types of audits, this falls into an audit, but I
Okay.
thank you for coming forward.
There's no quality assurance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, may I ask a
You can
question?
call it whatever you want.
Let me ask the question of my colleague and Mr. Scanlon. From a procedural point of view, this is required by state law, am I right?
That's correct.
And does the State Board of Elections have any oversight or come in to observe the processes we're auditing, or what are the checks and balances relative, legally required to this process?
So, first of all, the board is required to provide notice of the 5% audit, which we did. The State Board of Elections is charged by statute with randomly selecting 5% of the precincts to be audited. And then they provide the board with that list of precincts. And then the board would go in and retabulate the optical scan ballots and the touchscreen ballots in those precincts, in the 5% precincts. The state board is also charged with randomly selecting 5% of the total number of early voting machines. In Chicago, we use touchscreens. So they select 5% of the touchscreens for purposes of the audit. And those are the machines that we go through and we manually audit. Notice, as I said, is provided to all civic organizations who qualified under the statute, to all candidates, and we provide it to the Democratic, Republican parties, also to the Cook County State's Attorney, the U.S. Attorney, and the State Board of Elections. And they're all entitled to be present.
And the process by which the count is done beyond the 5%, as you articulated, are the rules of that are promulgated in some fashion by the state?
Well, the audit has to be done in compliance with the statute. We provide, and this board approved procedures for conducting the 5% audit, and that's what we followed, and that's what, and we gave, copies of those were available, and those are the procedures we use during the audit.
Okay.
The state statute I've included in our packet, and the State Board of Elections does have the right to come and observe. We are filing official complaints with the State Board of Elections.
Counsel, quick question. If a candidate wishes to challenge the results, how does that proceed?
The 5% audit and retabulation cannot be used to change the results of the election. It's only a means of testing the voting equipment. It does nothing to change the results of the election.
And if a candidate wishes to challenge the results, the reported results, how does that take place?
Of the election?
Of the election.
There's two things. One, if a candidate received votes equal to at least 95% of the votes received by the successful candidate, the losing candidate can file a discovery recount within 5 days after the proclamation. That would entitle that candidate to examine and have a recount of ballots in up to 25% of the precincts in the particular district or jurisdiction, and also to examine all election materials in those particular precincts. So that's first step. The candidate also would have an opportunity to file an election contest with the Circuit Court of Cook County contesting the results of the election. That would have to be filed within 10 days after the date of the proclamation. And the candidate would have to file a petition with the Circuit Court and would have to plead and state sufficient facts which would demonstrate that but for certain errors or events or election fraud, if the case may be, but for those events, the results of the election would be different. If there is a high probability of that occurring in the opinion of the court, then the court could order a recount of all precincts in the district or ward, or in those precincts and districts that are selected by the candidate who filed the election contest.
And that
And that
5-day and 10-day clock would start today?
Start today, yes.
Very good.
Yes.
Okay. The next person is Daniel Sheehan. Good morning, Mr. Sheehan.
Morning, thank you.
And just, you have 5 minutes.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I noticed on election day in the 40th ward, I worked in a double precinct, I volunteered in a double precinct, and most, if not all, let's say 3/4 of the new voters were presented 2 IDs and given provisional ballots. And I noticed almost all the address changes were given provisional ballots. So I had a problem with that, and we had an investigator that came around, but he had like 3 or 4 precincts to do. I was wondering if maybe for the next election, in a ward like the 40th, where there's a strong machine presence, to possibly get an inspector at every poll all day long. I know it'd be a financial burden, but I think that's the only way you can get a real fair election in the 40th ward. Because as soon as these inspectors left or I left, the shenanigans would start. I noticed the election judge who has been there for years had paraphernalia on the voting table next to the ballots. I asked her to remove it, she complied, which is fine.
What kind of paraphernalia?
It was a sample ballot by the Democratic Ward Committeeman with his name on it. And we didn't have enough volunteers to do every poll, to have someone at every poll all day long. We just didn't have enough volunteers. And I worked the nursing home.
Did you call Election Central?
Yes, I got busy or the phone just rang. So if you could please hire more telemarketer callers, that would be great. And also, I worked in nursing homes. That was done very good, very well. Cook County had sheriff's deputies. Board of Election had a lawyer, and they had an investigator, and they all knew what they were doing. They took charge of the situation. And I was hoping that would be the case on Election Day, but it wasn't. And our poll had only 2 judges. It's one of the busiest precincts in the ward. Voter turnout only had 2 judges that day, and they couldn't keep up with everything.
And you said that was what ward? And
40th ward.
And what precinct?
Precincts 15 and 3, I believe. Napleton, Chrysler, Peterson, and Western.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
It's the Napleton Chrysler dealership at Peterson and Western.
Okay.
It's a double polling place. And let's see what else. Oh, they also had ballots were given to people. Ballots left the polling place and went out to a curb to let people vote. I saw that on 2 occasions, and I called, Election Central, and there was no answer.
Okay, what time did you call Election Central?
I was calling late morning, early afternoon.
Because we had all our people here.
I called in that polling place at least 5 or 6 times, got no response.
Did you call the state's attorney's office?
Same thing.
And you didn't get an answer there either? Okay.
Just to say, according to the election code and our judge's handbook, there is curbside voting for people who cannot come into the polling place.
Okay.
And they make arrangements with us ahead of time. So I will check. Is this
Okay.
the 15th precinct?
Yes.
Okay, I will check on that.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. That's all I have to say for now.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else?
Well, the only item would be on the provisional ballots. If that were the case in that precinct that statistically did not bear out across the city, we had approximately 10,000 provisional ballots total, and approximately half of those eventually counted. Actually, more than half.
More than half.
More than half, which is a first. But we had 33,000 election day registrations and changes. So obviously, 2/3 of all election day registrations did not land in the provisional ballot. So,
Okay.
I don't know if this was the precinct that, I had also received a report of new voters being given provisional ballots. I think this happened at a couple of locations because it was a new process for us, and there's a learning curve there. So I would ask Ms. Bateman to make sure that when we're training our judges for the November election, please make it a point that, these people are fully registered and they get the regular ballots, not the provisional ballot, unless there's some other reason to give them a provisional. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Next is Michelle Suzanne Gale from the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project.
Good morning.
Again, you have 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm Michelle. Nice to be here this morning. Thank you. I'd like to share my observations at the CBOE's 5% retabulation. I participated on March 23rd, 25th, and 28th of 2016. And like Dr. Laura shared with you, there were some very questionable sort of issues that came up. But I think that, since we're all working towards having a fair audit and being able to ensure that we have a democracy that's functioning, it's very important to be able to talk about these things and be able to lay out where the flaws are. So, for example, I observed CBOE personnel rapidly adding tallies to their tally sheets for many candidates. This was towards the end of the day or in the middle of the day, specifically on the 28th I observed this, hurrying up just really quickly. I've never seen tallies done so fast. Going straight down the sheet for many candidates. One of the personnel explained to me that their method was to count the squares on the tally sheet. Each of the squares on the tally sheet, which I could show you. Each of these squares symbolized five tallies, 5 votes. And one explained to me that their method was to count the squares on the tally sheet, symbolizing 5 votes or tally marks each, and make a dot in the box at the, to mark the end of the CBOE count. So they would see the CBOE count and they go, oh, we have, let's say in this example, for example, 100 votes for one candidate, and they go 1, 2, 3, and they count up to 20 boxes, which symbolize 100 votes, and they just put a little mark there. And then they told me, the mark would be made in the 20th box, for example, and they told me that they would stop counting votes once they reached that point. So I observed several tables following this system. This has nothing to do with necessarily the integrity of the employees, but this means that they were feeling, in this particular instance, I felt that they were being pressured, or at least feeling the necessity to, or perhaps they just weren't being explained how to do it properly, to make sure that they got to that point, and then they were basically done with the job. Now that's not really the way we do an audit. I don't think that that's really a credible way of believing that we've got a fair tally. Several personnel obstructed my vision of the paper ballots as they were being fed into the machines.
Can I just ask you, because have you done audits before, or I just want to know?
I participated in other elections. I have not done audits before, but I do have background in political science.
Okay, because you're saying that this isn't the way to do an audit, and I just didn't know whether you had any experience previously to form the basis for it.
Logically, I don't think it makes sense to have a number at the beginning and say, what we believe, the CBOE believes that their goal is to reach 101 votes, for example, for this candidate, and then have auditors, personnel of the CBOE, stopping once they reach that number. That just doesn't seem like, I mean, I don't have a professional background in auditing. Logically, as a citizen, that doesn't seem to make much sense.
Okay.
And I figured that would probably mean something to you guys, because we're all working towards the same goal, right?
Okay.
So, can I just finish really quickly?
Sure.
Several personnel obstructed my vision of the paper ballots as they were being fed into the machines. I witnessed management telling personnel they did not need to facilitate our viewing. One table actively obstructed my participation by placing their large blue ballot box horizontally in the chair next to them. I was not permitted to touch anything, obviously, but I asked them to move the chair so I could step closer and see, but they refused. When I asked, they also refused to let me see their tally sheets for more than a brief second that they were marking the page. I understand that that's legally within their right, but it's not facilitating the process, and if we're all working towards the same goal, it could be a little bit more hospitable. They would turn the sheet so that I couldn't see from my end of the table without moving the chair and blue box, obstructing my views. So there are a lot of cases of obstruction, unfortunately, and I think that that's a very sad thing, because if we're all working towards having a fair and functioning democracy, the Chicago vote is essential. We have to make sure that we have the largest county in Illinois has to have a very fair audit, and I believe that would be important to all of us.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, do you have any responses on what we could do to make that a fairer process in the future?
Well, I think I'd like to know if...
We're gonna take all these comments and questions and we're gonna review them.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Mr. Kress, I would really appreciate your thoughts, since you are a professor of auditing, I'd love to hear your thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
no, I definitely want to look into these further,
Yeah.
see what the responses are from the personnel of the board. And I apologize if, because of a miscommunications or whatever, there was, some difficulty here. And I will see to it. I was at some of the counts downstairs, and I've been out to the early voting sites and all, and I will make it a point to spend more time during the 5% audit out at the warehouse after the November election to make sure that there are any difficulties that are resolved immediately, and we don't have to go into this. But I appreciate you coming forward. I appreciate what you do. You have a degree in political science? From where?
Richmond University in London.
Wow, I'm impressed. Okay, well, I appreciate you coming forward. Thank you.
Okay. The next person is Chaya from the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you. I'm Kyra Rubenstein, and I'm with the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project, Who's County, Chicago. I spoke with a number of voters who were given provisional ballots, many of them who voted at O'Keefe School on South Merrill. I'm sorry, I don't know what ward that's in at this time, precinct. Many of these people were angry, and a number of them were African Americans. One who told me that he was appropriately registered, as were his friends, and they had all come prepared to vote, as they should have been. They were told that they were not registered. One woman I spoke to was extremely upset, angry, yelled, they're trying to get the black people to not vote, and I will never vote again. I am not going to do that again. I'm not going through that again. Several provisional ballot voters were Hispanic and told me that they were told that they could vote at the precincts at which they were working. As it happened, these were not precincts in which they lived, so they were given provisional ballots, and they were not told that they needed to vote in precincts they should have been. So they were counted as voting out of precinct, so they were given provisional ballots. The other people I spoke with were new, younger voters, 18 to 24-year-olds, who had been told they were not registered, even though they had registered previously, or the same day registration as allowed. No one who received provisional ballots was told that they could come to the Chicago Board of Elections and vote by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, March 22nd. Finally, as a member of the project, I monitored counting of provisional ballots on Friday, March 18th, and Saturday, March 19th. And out of 2 afternoons, only 4 provisional ballots were counted as being valid. Every other ballot was not registered or voted out of precinct. Many people I talked to who were voting out of precinct were told that yes, indeed, they could vote, wherever, as is in the case of early voting, but not on election day. So they just thought it was okay and their votes would be counted. Thank you very much.
Mr. Allen?
O'Keefe is a challenging site. That's historically one of the largest locations that we have, with generally 4 or 5 precincts.
Multiple precincts in that. And we looked at those, and all those ballots, if they did vote provisional, would have been counted, so we did look at that.
Judges voting out of precincts, that is absolutely the rule, that they should be given a provisional ballot. They are instructed both in the judge election handbook and in their classes, if they're going to be working out of their home precinct, to make sure that they utilize early voting or vote by mail ahead of election day, because if not, they can't leave during the day. That's explicitly, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, that's explicitly in Judge of Election Handbook. It says they cannot leave during the day to go to a home precinct, otherwise you'd have even more disruptions.
These weren't election judges, these were poll watchers, and they said they were volunteers.
Both they're poll watchers and they're out of precinct, they're correctly given a provisional ballot.
But they were not told, they should have been told that they needed to vote in their precinct. They were told it was okay to vote out of precinct.
To that end, we checked the data on the electronic poll books. There were 12,000 successful redirects, far more than there were provisional ballots. The most redirects occurred in places with high use of election day registration, and for example, Precinct 7 of Ward 49 at Loyola University had 59 redirects just in that one precinct. So on that front, the poll books were functional, either giving the voter a text message or just allowing the judges to write down the address of the correct polling place to go.
I just wanted to interject that the 2 people that I spoke to, did not speak English very well, and one became rather frightened and said, oh, I can't go down and vote because I have to work, because I have to support my family. And I said, well, you know, don't worry about it, and it's okay. And these were just people, and in my opinion, this is just my opinion, but these two people were very much taken advantage of. So those are my thoughts.
Ms. Bateman, quick question. If somebody does vote by provisional ballot outside the precinct, are any of those votes cast? Counted?
If they're registered to vote and they're voting outside their precinct, then yes, it's the federal. There's a whole list of offices that yes would count. If it was a matter of a same-day registration where they were registering and voting in a precinct that wasn't theirs, then no, it would not.
Okay, but if they were previously
they were
registered
registered to
and
vote-
voted outside their precinct,
Yes.
then practically every vote would have been counted except for maybe water reclamation
Committee-
district or
committee
something.
More
How about
Kennedy
And-
same-day registration?
Same-day registration in the wrong precinct
No.
does not count.
They
at
have
all.
Nothing
to,
gets
same-day
We will add them to
registration.
the registration
Right.
rules for the fall,
Yeah.
but again, they need to go to the
They
correct
have to be in the
precinct.
correct
But as
precinct.
far as if you are registered to vote and you simply vote outside of your home precinct and you go to provisional ballot, then yes, portions of that ballot will count, absolutely.
May I ask how
And
many
to that
federal-
end, to that end, we went through a number of provisional ballots, the envelopes. The voters wrote on the outside of the envelope, I know I'm in the wrong precinct, but I want to cast it here. So I mean, it was pretty self-evident that they were advised, that they knew, in many cases, but they made the decision that they did not want to travel however many blocks it was.
But at least most of their votes would have been validly cast or would have been counted.
If they were already registered.
If they were previously registered.
If they were not,
And
we'll
some
add them to the
companies-
rolls, but.
May I ask how many federal?
To interject, they were registered and they were told they could vote in that precinct and they just accepted it. And I'm telling you, they seemed like they were intimidated
Election
because they
judges.
they didn't understand.
Yeah.
Do
The
you know what
election
I'm
judges
saying?
told the poll watchers that they could vote in that precinct?
Yes, yes,
So the poll watcher came on election day, not having voted already,
yes.
and asked the judges if they could vote there.
They were told they could vote there.
On election day by the
Yes,
judges.
yes. That's what they told me.
Something else to add to our training for
So I-
November.
yeah.
Thank you.
May
the
may we
next-
ask how many federal-only votes were counted? Can we have that number of the ones that were out of precinct, but we counted the federal only?
I can get you a count. I know that overall 53%, which is rather unusually high number, counted partially or in full. I don't have a breakdown on how many of them.
Okay. Rebecca Curlin from the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project. And you'd like to talk about the audit and the proclamation, right?
Yes, hello.
Okay. Go.
My name is Rebecca Curlin. I began in the software quality assurance industry in 1999. I have formal training in quality process design, requirements analysis, and data testing. I assert that the audit does not meet basic criteria for reliability. Point one. And this, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about what I've observed here in the meeting house. Since we started, my affidavit clearly is not going to cover that, but quality assurance is an ongoing process, and we always take into account things that we've learned midstream. Allowing 5 minutes for a citizen discussion of issues they have observed is fundamentally inadequate. When we test until we cover the cases, and I'm telling you now that we have each of us, more than 5 minutes worth of cases to discuss. Preventing us from doing this means that you are preventing us from discussing the issues we have observed, and that means that you are allowing flaws to remain in the process.
And Ms. Curlin, one other thing is if there is anything additional that is not covered within, your comments, you are free to provide us with a written statement.
I'm speaking of the 5 minutes speaking.
I know, but I'm telling you that you can provide us with a written statement of anything additional you would like to add, and it will be made part of the record.
I hope that this exchange does not take down my clock, because I'm actually speaking of the speaking time, and that's the third time that I've said that, and I'm going to move on now.
Go right ahead.
In listening to the CBOE characterization of the process from James M. Scanlon, General Counsel, I have learned that my affidavit could be expanded from the 6 paper ballot items, 14 electronic paper tape items, and 1 generalized work stoppage item to include many more observations such as bodily obstruction, statements from workers that they were not allowed to show me X or Y, and process management by supervisors that caused me to be delayed in returning to my team's tables and caused me to leave tables before teams had completed their work. I bring this up because of the lawyer's assertions that no obstruction occurred and that there was total cooperation. These assertions are in fact false. With respect to the lawyer's assertions, as to the audit existing for the purpose of machine-to-machine validation, I observed no such validation. In fact, my affidavit specifically points to items where a machine-to-machine validation would be impossible given the process and the result comparisons that I observed. I observed no tape comparisons in my presence, and if the purpose and design of this audit is intended to compare machine results to machine results, that should have been performed. I will now move to my affidavit. Paper ballots were not visually audited. The paper ballots were not compared to the machine record for the scan. The paper ballot scanning machine output was not compared to any other machine record. Paper ballots, which the machine apparently did not accept. I was obstructed from viewing the actual counter, but according to the beeps on the machines and according to my observations of the ballots, they should not have been accepted. They were not handled in a manner such that their machine processing status could be checked. Their inclusion or exclusion from the total machine counts cannot be ascertained by the current audit method, therefore no machine validation was performed. Paper ballots with obvious marking errors, such as double-marked presidential candidates, were fed into the machine, were not handled separately after their scanning process, and my tallies of presidential candidates separated double-marked ballots. I noted for that particular scan set that presidential candidates were overcounted in an exact comparison to the numbers that I had marked down for double-counted ballots. This indicates that further validation of the machine process is highly indicated. The machine scanning bins, which receive scanned paper ballots, were grossly insufficient to the paper ballot quantities for each set of ballots. Multiple times, the CBOE employee feeding the ballots into the machine stopped, bounced the machine up and down on the ground in order to clear a paper jam, opened the compartments, pulled out 2 bins, 1 large and 1 small, unceremoniously dumped the paper ballots out, pushed them together, put the bins back in the machines, and continued scanning, sometimes refeeding a ballot that had stopped due to the machine's problematic behavior. This is not a machine test. In regards to my observation that there are 2 bins inside the scanning machine, 1 large and 1 small, the purpose of these was not explained to me, but I note that when a machine is designed, there is no reason for separation of output streams unless those output streams are supposed to be monitored. They were not monitored by the workers. As I noted, the ballots were shuffled back together, stacked together. Ballots were never reviewed by the workers, bagged up, taped up, put back in the transit cases, and locked. This was not a machine audit. With respect to the electronic voting machine paper tape records and tabulation activities, I observed such as the following. I observed ballot readers. So the teams consist of people that I'm going to call readers and talliers. There could be 1 tallier, there could be 2 talliers. That was the protocol I observed. I'm going to say that having 2 talliers is a better audit than having 1 tallier, for obvious reasons. You want duplication of your results. You want to be able to check the auditor's actions as well as the paper output that they produce, right? Many teams only had 1 auditor, especially for the early voting machines. So the ballot reader would read out the votes on the roll tape, reading quickly, not reading office names, reading first names only, reading nicknames, Prinkle for Preckwinkle, A, B, whomever, and then switch to using last names. Talliers complained audibly, I'm confused, wait, what was that? Flipping back through their pages, wait, did I mark that? I have no idea. This is not an audit. Audits are performed carefully. This is not a careful process. CBO readers followed no consistent method for marking or otherwise freezing their paper tape records in place when taking breaks. Some of them certainly did freeze their paper tape record using a paper clip or something like that. One of them started freezing their paper tape record after I suggested to them that they mark it with a pencil. They were simply rolling them up in some cases, placing them on their tables, and then walking away for a break. I noted down the last name read. When I started observing this happening, I began to note down the last name read, and when the ballot reader called off the name of the, or the number of the ballot that they had just read, which was not always the case, and they were not required to give that information, okay? When this information was trackable, I wrote it down, and when we came back from break, I observed ballot teams to sometimes go back and read the ballot from the beginning, reading votes that had already been tallied. This is not an audit.
If you would please wrap it up, I'd appreciate it.
Do you want to hear more about the audit?
Your time is,
Do you want to hear more about the audit?
if you would like to come back or put it in writing.
It is in writing.
certainly-
It is in writing. I'm going to make one more statement. And this regards the process that I'm observing here in this room. I question the method of holding a separate meeting for the audit confirmation. No agenda was distributed. I noticed that, you know, we're following some rules of order here. This agenda outlines items. We received no outline of these items. There seems to be no paper trail of this audit approval that we as citizens could carry out into the world. Why is that? How does this accord with your standards of order for your meetings? Do you have any response?
Thank you.
I see.
Mr. Allen? Yes, Mr. Stan, did you have anything to say?
The agendas were posted.
The agendas are posted, everything is on the website, as I understand.
Correct.
Right? Ms. Bateman, the ballot box
Yes.
has two compartments
Correct.
to it, and what is the purpose of the two compartments?
The front ballot box is for ballots that have write-ins. And we do not, we don't look at the write-ins at the audit.
And so the scanner automatically will place a ballot that has a write-in?
It has to have the target area connected. If the target area for a write-in in an office is connected, then it will deposit the ballot in the front portion of the ballot box,
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. The next person is Mr. William Shipley from the Illinois Ballot Integrity Project. Mr. Shipley? Good morning.
Good morning. I want to thank the commissioners for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the incidents that I witnessed during my participation on, it was March 28th, Monday, that I observed the audit. I should begin by saying I am an attorney licensed in the state of New York, but currently resident in the city of Chicago. And I guess I would like to first start by seconding the objection of my colleague with respect to the lack of a printed agenda for the first meeting where the proclamation was made official and failing to provide opportunity to the citizens of the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago who are here today to present evidence with respect to flaws and discrepancies that they observed through that process prior to that proclamation being made.
Okay. And Mr. Shipley, just as a fellow attorney from New York and Illinois, I would like to tell you that, as you've heard here, there is a process, a legal process by which you can contest the proclamation. And that is the procedure that is used here, not contesting it in
I understand
You
that
understand?
if one would
Okay.
like to formally contest the result, that one should do so legally, and there is a process to do that. But as a practical matter, with respect to certifying an election process that has been audited as required by the state of Illinois, I think it proper and appropriate that one should provide opportunity to consider any possible facts that may call into question the legitimacy of the final result that you are issuing a proclamation for.
But that is what the statute provides for, and that is for a court to decide whether the process was right or wrong. Okay?
Yes, but by
Thank
failing
you.
to provide that opportunity, then you are inviting a legal challenge, which is costly to taxpayers and really could be avoided by just having a more open process from the outset at the beginning. But that being said, I would like to continue with respect to what I observed. You all have a copy of my affidavit with respect to what I observed. I'm kind of speaking off the cuff. I don't have a copy of that in front of me, but just with respect to.
Here you go. Here you go.
No, I'd like you to be able to.
Okay, very
Yes,
good.
we got
follow
it.
along.
We got it.
So I only participated in the recount with respect to the electronic voting machines. First, it's my understanding that the 5% number that was used in the recount included voting machines that did not actually record any votes on election day, because it did include voting machines that were on standby or reserve in the event that there was any malfunction. And so including those voting machines and the 5% that one is going to survey for the purposes of an audit, I don't think is legitimate when one is conducting an audit of votes, because you're essentially conducting an audit of voting machines that do not have any votes in them. So that, just at the outset, is extremely problematic with respect to the legitimacy of the audit process. I observed 3 tables at that recount on the 28th of March, and at none of the I observed irregularities at each and every table, whether from my own direct observation or as reported to me by the election personnel themselves. And the way that these manifested themselves suggests an intention on the part of either management personnel at the Chicago Board of Elections or other individuals supervising the election that rather than conduct an independent effort to ascertain how many votes actually took place and then compare that to the final result as certified, rather it indicated that the goal of the exercise was to conform their tally sheets with the official voting amount that was already listed and printed next to the places where it was indicated that they should tally. And the reason I say this is because I saw multiple different methods for achieving that result, which indicates to me that this was on the basis of instruction or some guidance on the part of those supervising the process. So on the first table, what I observed was that the individual tallying final votes would not allow me to record the end of their tally. Basically, you had, as was previously stated, one individual reading the vote from the tape of the electronic voting machine and the second individual counting that with tallies on the sheet. So at the end of the count, when the tape was done reading, the person had all of their tallies tallied, and at that point I asked to witness what the final tally was, and I was prevented from doing so. And I was told that I could record the final version, but that this tally that they had, again at the point that they stopped reading, was not the final version, quote unquote. So that indicated to me there was some additional process that was going to happen after the count was done. What that additional process consisted of was erasing some of the tallies that exceeded the official vote count, meaning essentially in the audit they were erasing votes that the electronic voting machine paper record indicated had been cast in order to conform their own count with the official count that was printed in bold on their tally sheets. Now, if one was conducting an audit where the attempt was to ascertain the truth of how many voters cast votes in support of a given candidate, then what one should do in that process is count those votes and then compare that count to what the final tally was, and not change the tally to conform to what the recorded count already had been in that precinct. So I would suggest in your review of this process, if you want it to be a legitimate process, that those who are counting the votes should not have access to the information that indicates what the official count was, but rather should independently determine how many voters in that precinct cast votes for specific individuals. Because that way you are avoiding the possibility that that would be manipulated to achieve some predetermined result. At the second table, I saw the opposite problem.
Okay.
Sorry, an opposite strategy.
And just
Um,
to let you know,
I'm running.
You're out of
Yeah.
time.
I
But-
just
but
if I could speak to
absolutely.
the second,
Yeah.
just the second table that I
Absolutely.
observed. So at that table, similar to what my colleague had described, there was, instead of erasing votes, and I should also add that I have photographic evidence of the erasure of these votes, which you're welcome to take a look at if you're interested. But at the second table, instead of erasing votes that exceeded what the official vote count that was printed next to their tally spaces was, instead what they did is once they reached that official vote level, then they began to record votes on papers other than the official paper that was provided to them to record their tally. And by that I mean Post-it notes. So what they did is they took Post-it notes and they would record the additional votes on those Post-it notes. And then at the end, again, do a similar concordance process that is suggestive of an effort to do something other than just count, which is to accord that count with the result that they were attempting to achieve. And again, that seemed to me highly irregular. And it should be of concern to everybody in this room if they want our electoral process to reflect the will of the voters of the city and the state. Finally, at the third table, it was reported to me that when the individuals at that table who were conducting a count, who were conducting an audit, failed to achieve a result that was in accordance with the previously existing election result, that they were told to recount again. And then when they insisted that they had counted correctly, they were told to count a third time. And then when they again insisted that their count was correct, then other individuals were brought in to conduct their own recount, and they were made to feel as if they were doing something wrong, as if this was somehow a mistake on their part. So again, that is indicative to me of instructions by managers or personnel that there was strong pressure applied to them to achieve a result that was in accordance with the result that already existed, which I would proffer is not in accordance with what one would expect an audit or not in accordance with the procedures that one would use for an audit. An auditor is somebody who attempts to independently ascertain a factual result and not certify a different result. And it was really more like a certification process as opposed to an independent audit. And all that information is in my affidavit, which you're welcome to take a look at.
We will.
And I thank you for your time, and I really hope that these will be taken into account.
One quick question. The standby voting machines that we looked at, again, as indicated before, the State Board of Election tells us what we're to look at. Did those show that they had a zero vote in them?
3 of them,
If I
yes.
may,
Yeah.
before the start of early voting, the board is required to give a complete list to the State Board of Election of every machine that we plan on putting in use and that we potentially could put in use. As you know, during the course of early voting, we are going to have to replace equipment that, for whatever reason, mainly because it's more than 10 years old, it may break down. We have to take that machine out of service. We need to put another machine in its place. We never will use, hopefully, all of the equipment that we identify that we may use. So the state, which acts independently of us, then selects at random the machines that it wants to check. If the state wants to review that process, the state could. But right now, we're given a list by the state which to check.
My point
And
is
so they draw from.
that this includes the machines that may not have been used.
Exactly.
And in fact, it's important that we check those machines because knowing, just as I know from studying past elections in this jurisdiction and others, there's sometimes a case where a ballot box suddenly shows up and it's got votes in it. Okay, so we want to make sure that a machine that's supposed to have a zero has a 0. So that's the reason that those are included in the count. So, thank you.
We've objected to this at the State Board of Elections, and they're looking at this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Scanlon?
And on that point, I had learned that there was an issue with regard to these machines, these early voting machines that had no votes on them. I had a conversation with Bernadette Harrington, who was Deputy General Counsel at the State Board of Elections, and I told her, that we were going to audit the machines that they had listed on their list, and we didn't have any authority under the statute to add additional machines in there or to substitute machines. We were going to follow the list that was provided by the State Board of Elections, even if those machines had 0 votes on them. And she agreed that we were following the proper procedure. She indicated they may look in the future to revising the procedures that they've developed for selecting both 5% precincts, but particularly the 5% early voting machines. But in terms of this particular election, she agreed that we would not substitute additional machines for the ones that had 0 votes on them.
May I just quickly respond to that? So if this is a case of a lack of coordination between the state and...
No, it's not a lack of coordination, it's a design independence, so that the state board selects randomly machines without any influence on our part.
Yes, and as a result of that designed independence, there is no coordination, right, between state election officials. Yeah, there should not be. So I would just suggest that in the future, a possible measure that could be taken was at the end of election day, and I would think this would be a good best practice anyway, to have some kind of record of what machines were not used to record votes, and then submit that to the state board, so that then they can ensure that those are not included in the recount machines that they randomly select for the 5% recount. That may require legislation.
And personally,
I realize, but if you were to make a recommendation on this point to the officials.
Personally, I want those machines included because I want to see if there's anything on them.
Yeah.
So, just to make sure.
I think
In terms of quality design, what we would actually do is we would determine the machines that were not voted and the machines that were voted, and we would run independent 5% audits on each group.
Okay, thank you very much. Executive session is now closed.
No.
We have public comment.
I'm sorry, public comment is now closed. And I'd like to thank each of you for coming in. It's sometimes there are issues that there could be a misunderstanding as to how things are required to be conducted. Sometimes there are issues that need to be addressed, and we welcome your criticism and your observations, and this is something we take very seriously, and we will take all the information that you have provided us, including the affidavits, and if you have any additional written statements you'd like to submit, we welcome them, and we will look into this and see how we can better improve our processes within the parameters set by the state. As you know, we don't operate independently. We do form, some rules, but as you can see, sometimes the state rules are
Cumbersome.
just, yeah.
Gaps.
Yeah.
Gaps, yeah, they're not filled.
But we thank you for your comments today, and we will be looking into this.
We will
Okay?
be providing you with more affidavits.
Thank you.
Okay. That would be wonderful. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda is executive session. Is there a need for executive session?
No, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay. If there is no need for executive session, then is there, let's see, a motion to
April 12th.
adjourn. To, Mr. Goff, is there a need for the April 12th meeting?
No,
or-
there is, no, I'd like to, if we can move that, just combine it with the 26th,
Okay.
please.
So, is there, seeing that there is no need for a meeting on April 12th, is there a motion to adjourn to our next regular meeting, which will be April 26th at 9 a.m.?
So moved.
Is there a second?
There is a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all very much.